Well, I realize that, first of all, this is extraordinary. I have had occasion to work with the European Internet Foundation in the past, and I've always had great respect for the quality of people who participate in this organization. And tonight is no different. Some of you I already know, some of you I will meet for the first time. But I want you to know that in this very complex internet environment, no one has all the answers. I've become fond of imagining the internet as a teenager, and my sons are now in their 30s, but I remember raising them through those teenage years, and the best advice I got was, no one knows how to raise teenagers. You just live through it, and one day they turn into people. And in a sense, the internet may be one of those kinds of things. I do want to get to IP version 6, but I'd like to somehow draw your attention to the rich and complex flavor of the term internet governance. It's a very, very broad term. It's not just about criminal activity on the net. It's not just about intellectual property protection. It's not just about the business rules and things like that. This is an extremely broad topic, because governance has to do with how the technology evolves. It has to do with what organizations and institutions contribute to that evolution. It has to do with how we go about deciding what kinds of practices and procedures we're going to adopt. I would extend this notion all the way to thinking about social interactions mediated through the network. I think at this stage of the game, even though the internet's been around officially and in operation since 1983, it has not been around in its commercial form until approximately 1988, which is about 20 years. And the World Wide Web didn't really trigger the use of the internet by the general public until about 1994. So if we were to date this general public's involvement in the net as to 1994, we're only talking about 18 years. So we really are in this teenage period. What I think is terribly important to recognize is that for many, many years, the internet population was made up of geeks like me. And the general public was not part of this. One of the prices you pay for introducing this infrastructure to access to the general public is that you get every possible flavor of abuse and let us say constructive use known to mankind, because it's everybody that, with all flavors of motivations and everything else. So you are dealing not only with a system that is in use broadly by a full range of general public. It's still only 2.3 billion people, by the way, so those of us who are online all the time have to remember that there are a lot of people who are not. But many of them are going to be online through their mobiles, which is a tremendous force for internet access. But you're also dealing with a system that is in dynamic technical evolution. This year especially, this is probably the most significant year, technically, that the internet has ever experienced. We are introducing, on a permanent basis, the IP version 6 protocol. It was standardized in 1996 in a great rush out of a fear that we would run out of address spaces back then. We didn't actually run out of the version 4 address space until February of last year, thanks to a bunch of procedures that we instituted to be conservative about allocation of address space. Not only are we introducing IPv6, but we're also adding generic top-level domains. And as rocky as that process has turned out to be, it's still a very important change to the internet's architecture. We're also adding security mechanisms like the domain name system security extensions, like the routing public key infrastructure, which is not yet implemented and maybe not even entirely designed, intended to help avoid hijacking of address space by people who simply announce address space that they don't own. So there is a lot going on. Internationalized domain names. How about domain names that are written in character sets other than Latin? So all of this is happening in 2012. On top of which, we're having this debate about intellectual property protection in the context of a technology which does not behave like any of the earlier technologies that we had in which we encapsulated intellectual property. The way copyright reads, at least in the US, is that you have the ability to, you have the authority to manage the reproduction of materials of works that had been fixed in some particular medium. That's the term that's used in the language I've seen. And the internet environment doesn't exactly fix this in a particular medium because it's digital, and that digital representation can be fixed in a variety of different ways. So we're struggling with a highly dynamic and highly versatile environment. We're also faced with this is the bit rot problem, and I won't go on and on about this, but we have the problem that we use applications now to create works, whether it's a spreadsheet or a presentation or a text document or something more complex like a simulation or a video game or something else. So we have these very complex objects that are meaningless unless the application software is available. We have the problem that that application software may not persist over long periods of time. So unlike a piece of vellum, which potentially could last for 1,000 years or more, we have digital representations of things whose instantiation in hardware is ephemeral. I mean, I would say if somebody showed up with an 8-inch floppy disk and said this was produced on a Wang word processor in 1985, we might have great difficulty finding a thing that would read that 8-inch disk. Now, we could move the bits from the 8-inch disk to some other medium, and so I'm fairly comfortable that we can reproduce bits. But what I am not sure of is that we can keep reproducing the ability to run the application that knows what those bits mean. And as parties responsible for thinking about Internet's future and our digital future collectively, we have to find a way to solve the problem of retaining the utility and value of things that are in digital form. We have a long ways to go to figure out how to do that. So I would like to suggest during the course of our conversation tonight that we explore what some of the challenges are to policymakers in particular, who have to figure out how to make this environment more trustworthy and safer for the users without trampling all over what I consider to be important and vital human rights to expression, access to information, assembly, and discussion. And among those various freedoms, I would like to suggest to you that we should strive for freedom from harm. But in order to do that, we have to choose a path that doesn't trample over or destroy the other important freedoms that have made this internet so powerful. One of the important freedoms that the internet exhibits is an openness to innovation. We call it permissionless innovation. You don't have to get permission from every ISP in the world to try out a new application and make it available. At least historically that's been the case. I can assure you that Sergey Brin and Larry Page did not go and ask permission from anyone to try out their idea. In fact, they borrowed some equipment in the process of doing it. And I don't want to go into too much detail there, but Stanford University inadvertently donated some equipment for them to try out their search engine. This is such an important element in the internet's useful success, this permissionless capability to go invent new things and make them available to other people. They can be monetized. This has nothing to do with monetization. It has to do with freedom. It has to do with freedom to fail, which probably happens a lot more than we know about with people who try out new ideas. This ability to permit people to try things out, to encourage and even facilitate their ability to try out new ideas is what makes this such a powerful medium. If I could leave you in this part of our discussion with a small mental model of what I think has happened in the net. Some people think about the people that worked on this back in the 1970s as having a vision of all of this, or maybe a hallucination, one of the two. It's probably important to distinguish those. In fact, we didn't. What we were doing was trying to solve a particular infrastructure problem. And so I think of this as being the group of people that figured out how to build roads. And we figured out not only how you build the road, but maybe some very basic rules, like maybe you should only drive on one side of the street and not run into people going in the other direction. If you come to a four-way stop, you should negotiate so that you don't run into each other. Please don't build the cars bigger than this, or longer than this, or wider, or taller, or heavier. And if you have these very simple rules, you'll be able to use this infrastructure. This says nothing about the detailed design of the vehicles. It says nothing about what the vehicles are carrying. It says nothing about the buildings that are adjacent to the roads. It's just the road system. And I think we were pretty lucky to come up with a way of helping other people tell them, how to build roads, and if you can find somebody to connect to, you can extend this road system. After that, all this creativity comes from other people who figured out how to put things on the roads, how to put vehicles on, how to build buildings adjacent to them, what services did those vehicles need. And of course, no comment whatsoever about what the vehicles are carrying. And if you think about this as a kind of a layered structure, then I'm very proud of having been part of the road system design, but I take no credit for all the wonderful inventions that have been put on top of that road. And so I think what I say here tonight is keep that road as open as possible so we can keep building more vehicles and more content and more buildings to service the things that are on the road. And we will all experience a great and valuable improvement in our lives. Once again, reminding you that there are people who do not mean us well, and we have to cope with them. And that, too, is part of our job, to figure out how to suppress some of the bad things that happen on the net. And there are technologies that can help, but we may also need there are only three ways to deal with this, and I'll stop with this observation. You can build technical methods to stop people from doing bad things, and sometimes you can actually inhibit an abuse. Sometimes that doesn't work. And so the next alternative is you try to find ways of detecting that an abuse has happened, and then trying to figure out who did that. And if you can find the person or parties that caused the abuse, caused harm, then you can say to them, we know we can't absolutely stop you from doing these things, but we've collectively agreed this is socially unacceptable, and if we catch you doing this, there will be consequences. This happens with drunk drivers. We tell them, don't drive drunk. It's bad, it's harmful, you may hurt other people, you may hurt yourself. But we know we can't stop you, absolutely. But if we catch you, there will be consequences. We will take away your driver's license, we will put you in jail, we will fine you. So there are those kinds of things we can do in the net. And then finally, there's simply moral suasion. Don't do that because it's just wrong. And those three things are the tools that we have available for trying to cope with the bad things that happen on the net. But please, let's make sure that in the course of trying to stop bad things from happening, we don't destroy the ability of the net to do all the good things that we know it can do. All right, so now I'll stop. We'll come have some dinner, and then we can get into a discussion, I guess, at some point in the course of the meal.